Hello and welcome to Biology Career Insights, the podcast where we talk with experts from the field of biology to gain valuable insights into the careers and explore ways to navigate the job market in this ever-evolving field. I'm your host, Dr. Manish Kumar. Today, we are joined by Ashish Ranjan, who is the Vice President at Kotak Private Equity. Dr. Ranjan takes care of investment in healthcare and life sciences at Kotak Investment Advisory Limited, an alternate investment arm of Kotak Mahindra Bank with over 8.5 billion US dollar asset under management. Dr. Ranjan holds a PhD in molecular medicine from the Humboldt University in Berlin and also has completed an MS in business management from Copenhagen Business School, Denmark. He received BSRT and Novo Nordisk scholarship respectively. Previously, he was also a fellow at the Institute of Medical Biology A-Star in Singapore. Ashish has over more than 12 years of experience in research and industry. Prior to joining Kotak Private Equity, Dr. Ranjan was at Sanofi India, where he was leading consumer insights and new product planning for India. Dr. Ranjan also was part of the Cipla's commercial scientific diligence team with focus on building US specialty portfolio. He was primarily involved in assets identification and diligence based on scientific and commercial parameters, ultimately to drive various acquisition opportunities from strategic and financial standpoint. He also worked as management consultant at Iqvia Consulting, formerly known as IMS Health, where his work ranged from market access, commercial diligence, business strategy, and health policies across life sciences and healthcare and pharmaceuticals. So Ashish, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Manish. Pleasure to join. We'll be
Thank
looking
you.
forward to the discussion.
Yes, awesome. So I will dive in right away. Can you tell us briefly about your background and your current role at Kotak?
Right. So, actually, I'm a scientist. I'm trained in science. I did my PhD in medicine, molecular medicine from Humboldt University, Berlin. Post that, did my management studies, MS from Copenhagen Business School. Before that, I was a fellow at Agency of Science, Technology and Research, Institute of Medical Biology, Singapore. Throughout my career, I've been doing science. Science has always been fundamental of anything that I've done. Post that, moved back to India, moved into industry, worked in management consulting. IQVIA is the largest management consulting firm in pharma healthcare. Was with IQVIA, done a lot of work around market access, market entry, strategy, health policy, and so on and so forth. From there was part of Cipla, where I was part of the mergers and acquisition team with intent to do lock, stock, barrel acquisition of US specialty companies. And from there, I moved to Sanofi, where I was leading their new product planning for India and consumer insight for cardiovascular, diabetes, and rare diseases. I often tell everyone that I've actually seen pretty much every side of pharma industry. I'm sitting across now. I'm at Kotak Private Equity. I take care of healthcare life sciences investments at Kotak Private Equity. So technically, I've been on every side of the table, from research to strategy to insights to investing to project management. I've pretty much seen on every side of this industry now.
That's great. So how does your work as VP of Private Equity impact the scientific community or the broader public? Perhaps a few words on that.
Right. So it directly impacts the whole ecosystem of healthcare life sciences. We at Kotak Private Equity, my role is to invest into companies and entrepreneurs who are doing innovative work in healthcare life sciences. So we tend to back companies in Indian ecosystems which are building strong, which are strong fundamental of sciences and are building companies on that. We continue to do that. It has an impact in the way that it essentially promotes scientists to do more work. It promotes scientists to come up with their own companies, and we also help them in strategizing and building these companies forward. So it has a lot of impact, apart from the fact that it helps these very smart scientists to really come to market and see the commercial aspect of their businesses. It has a broader impact of health. We are very focused on bringing innovative therapies, innovative solutions to India. Yeah, so that's how we think we are helping.
Amazing. Um, and our audience are normally like biology students and PhDs and postdocs who basically want to transition into these kind of careers. So perhaps if you can highlight, what are some of the key skills and qualities that are required to be successful, in the private equity field, and how can a biology student develop this skill?
Right. So Manish, these are two. It's a pretty broad question. Let me take it up in bits and parts. So number one, uh, as a scientist, you have to keep on learning. Most of us who are doing lab works or are working with animal models and cell cultures and so on and so forth, uh, we are not aware of what's really happening outside our own comfort, right? We are spending 15, 16 hours in our labs. We are very happy looking into our microscopes, but we are not really aware what's happening outside. So that essentially leads to two things. Number one, that you are not with pace of the realities of the world, and number two, you're also not ready for the reality of the world in the way that you're not properly trained about the skills which are really required for you to excel if you go out in the world. Now, as a research scientist, somebody who's pursuing their PhD or a postdoc can choose to be in academia, and I'm sure they'll do excellent, right? They'll do very well because that's their core competency. But a lot of us wants to move out of academia, and that is the point in time where you require a lot of learning. So as simple as basic Excel. I doubt hardly anyone who's doing their PhD knows how to do basic Excel. I'm talking. I'm not only talking only 1 + 1 = 2 kind of Excel, but things like modeling and which are really basic to and requirement of industry. So throughout my journey, I've kept on learning. When I graduated from my PhD, I was very clear that I want to do management studies because I think from third year of my PhD, I was clear that I want to get into this business, understand how money and finance work in this industry, and I recognize that I lack that skill. I like that skill of finance. I like that skill of management. So from third year onwards, I was very clear that I want to do a management study post my PhD. That helped a lot. That helped me in understanding the language of the industry. Post that, no, but the learning didn't stop there. Once you start working, this is the real learning happens when you start working, and that is the point in time. Used to go to office, come back home, do my own learning, do courses, training, so on and so forth, and kept on learning every day. And then now, pretty much well equipped to take anything and everything that's there. So I think what is very important is that one needs to keep on learning basic skills. Excels are definitely a must. I highly recommend everyone during their PhD to do a very thorough learning of Excels and modeling, because that is essentially fundamental basic of moving into industry. So that's one thing. Apart from that, curiosity is definitely helpful. Being curious, aware, being aware of what's happening outside your own field, being aware of how does actually world work. All of these are very important component of somebody working in industry. Where I work today, this is a slightly different ballgame. It's very different than that of R&D. It's very different than that of even working in a pharma company for that matter. I today work in a private equity space where we are investing into companies, we are investing into founders. So there's a lot of worldly knowledge that you need to have apart from the subject knowledge. Subject knowledge definitely helps you in understanding the core problem that the company or the founder is trying to solve. but worldly knowledge is required because after you're going to bet on these people. So it's a mix of everything. But yeah, bottom line, one has to keep on learning every day.
Absolutely. I think, uh, I mean, you addressed most importantly, that one should learn Excel. And I remember my consulting days where like I was really learning, pivot charts and stuff like that and modeling and stuff like that. So that's a great point. So do you think like, so perhaps you kind of, you were lucky to get a scholarship for management, right? But I know they're like, the MBA schools could be very expensive. And do you think like it's important to go to a management school, or one can, like for example, I transition into the commercial sector without an MBA, but I know the learning curve is quite steep. So, without doing a management study, if you could recommend some resources or, some things that, is helpful to students, perhaps that would be of great value.
Yeah. So I think rightly put, Manish, there one do not really need to go out and study management. Today there are multiple opportunities. There's a lot of online learning platforms. All of these edX and Udemy's of the world. All of them have their platforms, and one can learn everything there, right? To be honest, what you learn in a management school, you can pretty much learn outside management school. You really don't need to go to management school. But what happens when you are in that environment is that you get to cross pollinate ideas and you get to work with people differently, exchange different experiences. So that's definitely helpful, and that adds value in the long term. But all said and done, one needs to. If the intent is there to learn, there are multiple opportunities, right? Forget about all these edX and Udemy of the world. Just go to YouTube. YouTube
Yes.
has everything. And I have learned so much from YouTube. Even my management days, after coming back from classes, I used to go back on YouTube and learn it, because what professors tell me YouTube is a much more simpler way of explaining things. So if there's an intent, there's multiple platforms. Now,
Absolutely.
if somebody wants to really invest, also there are good training programs.
Yeah. No, that's really,
There
great point.
somebody is interested in it.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, so it's the intent that matters. If there's an intent, you will find a way to learn. YouTube is just wonderful. It's just out of this world. If somebody has access to YouTube, then you don't really require any other degree.
Awesome. Yeah, that's true. So, you started with a career in management consulting, and how important it was, as a foundation to, to transition yourself into private equity career.
Well, it was very important, and not only in private equity, to transition into industry in general. So management consulting is just a jump start, right? So you get it, you learn everything so quickly. The trajectory is just very steep. Uh, I remember days where I used to go office, come back home 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm back in office 7 o'clock in the morning because there's a meeting that needs to be done. Uh, there's a lot of lot at stake because you are actually working with CXOs and CEOs of the world. They anticipate that you are going to bring in solutions to the problems that they don't have solutions to. So there's a lot at stake. There's a lot of learning. I personally recommend everyone, if they get an opportunity to work for management consulting. It is just, and I see that difference. Post completing my consulting days, when I moved to industry, I always found myself 10 step ahead of everyone else. And that's this anyone who has done consulting in a good management consulting firm will I think will swear by.
That is so true. I mean, in fact, I would consider, my management consulting experience as a mini MBA, because I remember, I was sitting daily on Investopedia, learning, all the financial jargons, reading a lot of annual reports from the company. And that kind of helped a lot, also in future when I kind of transition to product management. So that's a great point, Ashish. Um,
Yeah, so, because what really happens is because you tend to do multiple magnitudes of different projects, right? Like, so
Absolutely.
one day you are, 3 weeks you are doing a market strategy. Next 3 weeks you are doing policy. Next 3 weeks you are into market entry. So it keeps on changing, and it's just so fast that either you learn or die. It's actually like that.
So yeah, the learning curve is quite steep. And as you said, the topics are quite broad. So kind of, you have so much to learn and, so much experience. And plus you are like working in, close teams, small teams, and
Yeah.
you have to be very efficient. So you also learn efficiency. And as you rightly said, you always have to, convince the key stakeholders like the CXOs or CEOs of the world. So you also learn to kind of communicate in a very crisp manner. So that's like,
Yeah. And I've actually seen and this is how the nature of that industry is, right? Management consulting is very fast paced, is very quote unquote cutthroat. I've actually seen so many fatalities, right? Like, people joined, people left 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 10 months.
absolutely.
Uh, but if you survive, that grind, then you will 100% be ahead of the curve.
Yes, absolutely. And coming back to your private equity career, so what are the current challenges or the biggest challenges that you face in your current role as a, say, VP of private equity, and how do you overcome them?
Well, in my current role, the challenges are of a different sort, right? Like, it's not the challenges are around finding good companies, around finding founders who are balanced in the way that they understand what they are doing, they understand the market, they understand how they can scale. So challenges are of a very different sort, right? It's execution. So these are operational challenges that really matters, right? With respect to personal challenge, there's I can't really think of pinpoint out any challenge per se, but it's actually about finding good opportunities. India, unfortunately, because we as a PE firm, we only invest in Indian companies. We don't invest out of India. All right. So India, and in today's world, at this point in time, India is actually at an inflection point, especially the healthcare life sciences space. Uh, so we actually see people coming back to India, all these PhDs and postdocs of the world coming back to India and starting their own companies and startups. Uh, but unfortunately, they lack understanding of Indian ecosystem. They know their space really well, but they don't understand the Indian ecosystem. And that, although they are born in India, but because they have lived outside India for a while, they tend to miss the nuances of this Indian systems. So challenge that I really see or face is communicating to these new age founders about the realities of the world. And hence these are very different sort of problems. Like, I can't pinpoint one. I'll give you an example. It might be slightly absurd, but I'll give you an example where one of the founders who has moved from UK. He's doing great work. He's doing rapid testing, genomic-based rapid testing, and he's one of the first guys to do it in India. But his expectations are that he built a model. He came to our office. He was showing us the model, and again, a random number. 5 years down the line, he said my sales would be whatever 4,000 crore. I was like, dude, it doesn't work like that. So I had to take him to another room, explain him, I've worked in this for so long. It doesn't work like this. But he kept on saying that no, it doesn't. It works like that because back in UK where he used to do postdoc, this is how things happen. So challenges are a very different sort. Challenges are to keep people grounded, to keep ourselves grounded, to keep people in check with reality is the biggest challenge.
Great. Yeah. I mean, that is, that brings to a follow-up question, because I mean, Ashish, you kind of pursued your studies abroad. You have lived in multiple countries, you have lived in Germany, Denmark, Singapore. And how was it like for you to go back to India and then, adapt to the, say, to the new culture? I mean, of course, your roots were in India, but then, after kind of, experiencing the culture abroad,
Right.
how was it, how,
So,
yeah.
I think great question, Mahesh. Whatever whatever I say, whatever how many countries I live, I'm actually from India, so that will never change. So when I move back to India for the first couple of days, maybe a week, 2 weeks time, it was slightly disturbing, and it was not disturbing because I didn't know how this country works. It was disturbing because just the weather has changed, and then I've lived some fresher air for a very long time. It so happened to be that I moved to India post Diwali, just a couple of days before Diwali, and I moved to Delhi. And
That's like a lot of
I'm
pollution.
asthmatic. I'm asthmatic by birth, and in Germany, Singapore, or Denmark, I lived about 8 years and never had one episode. So I pretty much thought that it's all over, done and dusted. But Delhi's Diwali, and I'm running from one shop to another to look for a asthma inhaler. But that was but these this was the this kind of everybody already knew, right? I already knew that this is how it is. Again, I come from a very small place. I come from Patna in Bihar,
Mhm.
so I understand the psyche. It doesn't matter which country I live, where I live, my psyche is actually very Indian. So I understand what are the problems in this country, how to navigate them. Living outside India for 8 to 10 years doesn't make me
Any
anything
foreigner,
better.
yeah. That's
Yeah,
true.
any foreigner. So I came back to India, and I was yeah, apart from slight upset stomach for a while, everything was back to as it was before.
And also, I mean, this is more of a social aspect, right? But also, like, what's the difference between the work cultures that you have experienced, at both sides?
Yeah, that work culture is drastically different, right? So on that aspect, I still feel that Europe is just way ahead. Even after working, you always had time. You always had time for yourself. You always have, you can go and talk to your friends, meet friends, evening times, and so on and so forth. You can take care of your health. In India, that unfortunately doesn't work like this, right? India works really hard. We spend a lot of time in our offices. Even if you manage to spend less time in office, you'll spend a lot of time on road because you're driving from one place to another. Traffic is terrible. So that aspect is really, yeah, that aspect is pretty bad. And it's been what 8 years, 7 years now in India. That still haven't changed. Me moving here. That's one part I still regret, that I don't have enough time for myself or to live a quote unquote healthy life now. One can challenge that. If somebody wants to live, if some they can really do that, but a drastic difference.
Mhm. But on the other hand, on the positive sides, I was just like, I was actually in India for 2 months, vacating around. And I realized, that, if you are Indian, by root, you also have certain advantages of moving back to India, and I'm sure you for, your personal reasons decided to move back, like many Indians who want to move back. So what are the advantages? And, any tips and tricks for anybody looking forward to, say, go back to their home country and
Yeah.
exploring their career? Any
So Manish, I'll tell you, it might sound very philosophical, or it might sound slightly forward looking, but this is the fact of life. India is actually doing really well. Uh,
Absolutely.
the next 10 years actually India. I'm talking from an investor point of view. I'm in this space. I talk to people, I talk to investors from everywhere in the world, and everybody is looking up to India. So India is actually at a very good space. What is required is people to come and leverage that. The government is helping a lot. The ecosystem is there. There's enough and more money in India. If you compare, I was actually a couple of days back. I met a friend. She was in India. She lives in Boston, and we were comparing how does cost of living works out to be, and standard of living works out to be for India. Now, if you get a good decent job in India, uh, rest assured you'll have a better life than living in US. So I was arguing that with her. She kept on saying that, I still want to live. I get that, but India is actually doing phenomenally well. We are at a really good space. There's a lot of job. There's a lot of opportunity. If somebody is smart enough, somebody is ambitious enough, they will start good job. Uh, One thing that really people misunderstand is that expectation of the salaries is always a barrier. Some people always believe that, I'm getting this much in Europe or this much in US. I want to move and I want to translate that into. They do a direct multiplication of euros to INR, and it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, that's incorrect, simply because you have something called PPP, the purchasing power parity, and I think in India with the same money you can afford a lot more things. So that's absolutely.
But India is very good, doing well. There's a lot of opportunity. People they should, if they are at lookout, they will find something. India can offer pretty much to everyone.
Amazing. And for the young students, who perhaps confuse private equity with consulting or investment banking, can you kind of elaborate on what private equity really means to a layman?
Sure. So private equity essentially mean that we are investing capital. We are allocating capital towards companies, and in return taking ownership of those companies. That's in one line. It So it is very different from a consulting or from an investment banking. Because consulting, let's take one consulting, for example. Consulting is when you are helping somebody to take a decision. In that point in time, your client might be a private equity firm, or your client might be a pharma company, where you are helping them to get into that decision-making situation. Investment bankers are different sort of people. Investment bankers are people who will introduce people like us who are in private equity to different opportunities and deals that exist. So they are mix of consulting and financial services. Private equity is a very different animal. It's very different from these two, because private equity are the guys who essentially end up taking these calls of investing or not investing. So the intent is to invest money, invest capital into these companies, get ownership of these companies, help these companies to grow, and maybe 5, 6, 7 years down the line, exit from those companies, essentially meaning that you sell your stake in those companies and make a return out of it. So that's what private equity is.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for clarifying this to the normal audience, because many a times we read that private equity firms kind of invest in certain company, increase their value, and then kind of sell it. So that's essentially your and your job as a VP is kind of to identify these opportunities, right?
My job is to identify these opportunities, invest in these companies, work with management to help them grow their company, leverage them, and then look out for an opportunity to exit where we can actually make our returns.
And one thing that sounds quite similar is the venture capital, so perhaps also if you're going to highlight the difference between venture capital and private equity, that would be also great.
Right. So VC and PE are actually similar category of businesses. VC comes early on in a life cycle of a company where people are investing in these companies based on their promise, their scale, so on and so forth. VC is more risky, but the returns that one can anticipate from a VC space is higher. Private equity is investment, and these are investment done in larger quantums into more stable company, financially stable company with a long-term vision is where you would do a VC, private equity investment. VC investments are done at a very early stage in companies where these companies are actually working towards building themselves into a more stronger growth and post-growth companies. Risk reward ratios are very different between VC and a PE investment. VC investment risks are very high, but so is rewards are very high. PE investment risk are slightly hedged, slightly limited, and hence are the returns. But it is the same bunch of people who do that, right? For example, in my job, I also do VC investment from in healthcare life sciences company. So we invest across life cycle of company. We invest in early stage company, we invest in late stage company, we invest in mid stage company. Depending on how and what we like about those companies, we'll take a call. We'll deploy capital accordingly.
Amazing. And that brings to another question that in this kind of career, or the kind of role that you are doing, you have to be really updated of the latest advancements in your field. So
Right.
what advice would you give to anyone aspiring for this kind of career, to stay updated on that?
Well, number one, be curious, stay curious, read anything and everything that comes your way. For example, with myself, life sciences, healthcare, uh, LinkedIn has so many posts that comes in. I tend to read pretty much every post that is important or related to my space. Because I'm a trained scientist, I also make a point that I at least read one research paper every week. I get my hands on from my friends or ask somebody to send it to me. Or there's a lot of open access available, so we do that. Um, I tend to end up reading a lot when I'm doing building a case for one investment, because then I'm reading 3, 4, 5, 6 paper at once. So reading is definitely a must. One should be really aware and then on lookout to read wherever they can. There's no right or wrong source. As much as possible, you should read.
That's really a great point. And sometimes I read about, I'll give you a classical example of a company called Theranos in US, and I was wondering that so many smart people are there, like in the venture capital world or the private equity world, but perhaps there are not enough scientists in this field, and that's why they tend to be fooled by some companies who kind of claim whose claims are really tall and not standing the, what do you say, the barriers of science or the
Right.
quality of science. So I think that's where like your scientific background plays an important role. And
Yes.
any comments on that,
Yeah.
Theranos
So
or
sure.
success
That's
stories? Yeah.
definitely, especially when somebody is investing in healthcare or life sciences companies. These are slightly more complicated spaces than regular investments. And with innovation coming into play, things changing every day, one needs to have a very thorough understanding of these sciences. Um, Knowing it, having been trained in this definitely helps. So if you see globally, if you see a lot of these big private equity firms, sector thematic private equity firms, right? Sector as in firms which are investing in healthcare life sciences. If you look at the composition of their team, about 50 to 60% of that team will essentially be of PhDs or doctors.
Mm-hmm.
So in West, it is 100% taken care of. You will have people who are really well trained in a sector thematic fund. People who are trained will be the ones who will be taking calls and decisions. For example, with Theranos, it just so happens to be, if you look at the cap table, there's no investor in that company which understands science. People who understood, they never participated.
That's like really, that also tells a lot about the venture capital world, right? That sometimes people think that they are really, really smart, but just because they lack the specialty, or special, say, scientist in their field, of the domain, then they can make that mistake. So as you rightly said, that they should have, normally this venture capitalist firm or the private equity firm should have somebody from the domain, right, who understand things better.
So,
And
Manish, the good firms, the good private equity VC firms.
mm-hmm.
So the good PE VC firms
Mm-hmm.
have them on board. Right now,
Mm-hmm.
it's not only with license. Let's say a
Mm-hmm.
fintech VC or PE firm will have
Mm-hmm.
people from fintech, financial services. A real estate fund will have a real estate people.
No, that's I think that's totally the point. Yeah. So what are some of the most exciting developments in your field right now, and what do you see as the future of the life sciences?
Well, there's a lot of activity happening, and all of them happening for good, right? There's a lot of targeted therapies being pursued in India. CAR RNK, newer innovative therapies. There's a lot of activity happening. siRNA. A couple of days back, I was in a conference where there's a researcher who has come back from MD Anderson, and he's trying to build his own siRNA company. So targeted therapies are doing great. It's now there's an infrastructure to it, right? So there are lab facilities, there's money available, there are people are willing to take their bets. So that's happening. There's a lot of activity happening. Medical devices. Medical devices traditionally has been dominated in India by exports, Medtronics, GEs, and Siemens of the world. But what we see is that there are so many innovators building medical device companies in India, and they are essentially going to compete with these foreign players, eventually, and great superior quality products. These are by every standard, these are great products. Wow. There's a lot of activity happening in AI ML space. Artificial learning is helping in building better algorithms, helping in diagnosis. There's plethora of services which are being developed, which is based on AI. For example, radiology, right? Teleradiology services. One doesn't require, you don't require radiologists to sit, because computers can do that job today. That's happening in India. X-ray scans. One doesn't need to read X-ray scans. Your computers are AI, artificial intelligence is doing it. We are invested in a company which is into AI ML for vertigo, which is a balance disorder. So there's a lot of activity happening in these spaces. Health tech is obviously booming. Health tech is because India is such strong in technology, software services, and health is a problem which has to be solved. People have managed to bring these two together and doing great work. So all of this is happening at a very fast pace.
Amazing. So Ashish, finally, the favorite question of this podcast, and that's like, what advice would you give to biology students who are considering a career in management consulting or private equity? And what are some of the most important things they should keep in mind as they pursue this path?
Sure, Manish. So I think the most important advice is that you have to skill yourself up, or else you'll be left behind in this race. It is actually a race. So one has to really skill themselves up. Apart from what you do in your lab, apart from what you do in your academic world, you really need to skill yourself up. That's point one. Secondly, you should always be on the lookout for opportunities. There's no right or wrong place to start. As long as you know where to do, what to do, that is very important. So there's no right opportunity, there's no wrong opportunity. You should just dive into it and take it as it comes. And thirdly, which I think is the most important from my point of view, is that you should be aware of what you don't want to do. Just be aware of what you don't want to do. Make that a point. Keep it in mind. Make it very clear. Talk to people. Understand that space. I'm sure it's management consulting, for example, sounds extremely fancy and jazzy from outside, but trust me, a lot of people will not say the same thing about it. So or for a PE or a VC or for any job for that matter, right? So one should be very, very clear what they don't want to do. I always tell everyone. I tell my friends. I tell my colleagues. I tell my juniors. Dude, don't worry about what you want to do. Figure out what you don't want to do. The moment you figure out what you don't want to do, you're sorted.
Awesome.
So if you manage to do these three things, I don't think there will be any challenge.
Wow. And in terms of skills, so you mentioned, I think that's a great advice of figuring out what not to, you eliminate what you don't want to do. But once you figure out which path to take, path is always driven by your interest, right? But skill sets, as you said, right? Like skill sets are so important. So which skill sets do you recommend? If somebody wants to pursue the path that you pursued, what are the skill sets that are that you can advise on?
So as I think in the beginning of the podcast, I mentioned great working understanding of an Excel is very, very handy. You should be aware of what's happening in the world. Hence, a general aptitude is very, very important. You should be also curious of what's happening outside your interest area, because eventually the decisions that you're going to take, or in an interview for matter, I'll tell you, in one of my interviews, the MD actually asked hardly anything about my own area. He kept on asking about things that has nothing to do with my area. So that's also a very, very important point. So you have to be honest, confident person. So if you have a PhD, people already imagine that you know stuff.
Yeah.
So you do not need to hammer that down again. You don't need to do that. What you need to do is tell everyone that you know things beyond science, for example. Convince them that you are the right person. Convince them that you can work in a team. That's very important, right? And you know, when I hire somebody, what's very important is that the person should be likable. That you are a likable person. And yeah, if you have these things, and you know, some of this is inherent to some individuals' personalities. Some of this can be learned, taught. So just do all of this, and I think one would be in a very good place.
Wow, that's a great advice. And Ashish, like if you can, if you can highlight some resources or organizations that you'd recommend for students who are, actually kind of looking forward to this career, anything specific if you can recommend?
So I think Wall Street has very good training material for people who want to have an acumen or learning, or who wants to learn about financial services. Wall Street is great. And these are very, very cheap, whatever, 3,000, 5,000 rupees courses, which are, but excellent courses. So Wall Street is great. If somebody wants to do management consulting, then YouTube is your go-to space. I'm forgetting the name of that book.
The case in point, because I read the book
Case in point. Yeah, so everybody uses case in point. Case in point is great. One should use case in point. But see, everything you can learn, you can practice as much as you want. But if you don't have the right set of people around you, so find a group, find a cohort which is doing this. Sit with them, talk to them. Sometimes you'll end up talking things which are not related to what you want to do, but that will also add. So look for people. That's also very important.
So thank you so much, Ashish, for sharing your insights with us today. It was a pleasure. It was amazing talking to you. So thank you so much. And for the audience, thank you for tuning into Biology Career Insights. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast and to get the latest episodes delivered straight to your device. So till then, bye-bye. Bye, Ashish. Thank you.
Bye.